So, Mr. Morgy,
So, Mr. Newt.
there we go. We are gonna jump right into it. Start of this one,
Recording
and
much earlier than normal.
yeah, instead of a late night recording, it's a midday. What is this? Crazy. We're generally a little bit more night owls as it is, but
Recording at 2 in the morning.
yeah. Today just happened to work out a little bit. Or work on the exact opposite side, and 2 in the afternoon, at least for me in
Wow.
Pacific time.
That's 4 for me, but hey, we'll,
Same
we'll
thing.
pretend.
Yeah, 2 a.m. somewhere. Uh,
Probably is.
so with what our focuses have been as of late around hardcore and DDO, a lot of the we've been talking about like macro structures or topics and not exactly how much we're actually interacting with it a ton. So we're gonna jump into what we've been doing actively,
Yeah.
and pretty much that's all just been hardcore for the past month since it's been out. And we went through, got 5K, got the rewards. Some people more begrudgingly than others. Some people like getting rewards because accomplishments.
Hey, maybe more begrudgingly, but one of us got it first.
That's true. That's true. Dang holidays. And
The
then
Murph Squad.
and then we moved into epics, and epics have been pretty like fruitful. I think this is one of the best epic leveling
Oh,
and environments that I've been on hardcore in my 3 seasons.
I think it's just like the best overall season for Epics so far. We've done way more like stuff in Epics than we have in previous seasons. Like we do raids on a rotation this season instead of being like, "Ooh, I'm a little scared to do the raids." Now we
Right.
literally do them on a rotation every week.
Yeah, we're doing it like every 3 days, and about or approximately every twice a week. We'll go in, do raids. We'll do more of the easy ones. There's a few. There's some hesitation until we can get a full party to do some of the more difficult ones. And those easy ones, that rotation, we'll sort of just go down the list, make some comments on them. Right away, probably the most rewarding and one of the easiest for actual current content that isn't like years old is Dryad and the Demigod. Been going hard on,
Yeah,
and
we went really hard 2 nights ago, getting
yeah,
timers from people and everything.
yeah, someone decided to uh, sponsor a ton of timers for the raids. We did it like what, 4 times, 3 times.
I
I think we
think
did
it
it
was
4 times.
4.
Yeah,
Yeah, because we timered once and then we came back and did it 2 more times.
right. And so, and each raid run we get, we're doing the optionals. We're just doing legendary normal, so it's like 11% drop rate, right? Or a
We even
low
got a
percent drop
greater
rate.
fatalist.
Right, that's the first one that I've seen. So we do it on that. We get 2 chests for the optional, pretty uneventful. There's there's a couple spots where high spikes of damage can happen. One on the bear, and
The Beatles fucking hurt too. Like
the beetles too.
Thune's Thune's 4K HP went to like 1700 at one point. It was a little spooky because he has 1400 HP,
Right,
or not 14. He has 4000 HP.
we have a Conda damage Dwarven barbarian who has 4,000 HP and like 10 buffs to 5K with blood rage and such, and on the beetles and the bear both, he got down to like half health, which is almost everybody else's full health pool unless you're a dedicated tank or like the tank healer that Morgy's playing. But when I'm in my DPS set, I'm just sitting around like 4 point or 2.2, 2.3K HP, and
You even
that's
dropped low at the end of one of those runs.
yeah. So the bears and the beetles, they can slap for like 4 to 800, and then hit multiple times, and then at the end, Seath, the unicorn that you can largely ignore. We just have a tank favorite soul just sort of kite him around. He can do this little like trotty jumping around Bucky thing, and I don't know didn't know the animation or like what exactly it meant, what it did. I was standing behind him, and then all of a sudden get knocked down and dropped to 30% HP, and so that was a little spooky.
Was a little bad,
Yeah,
but yeah. On the topic of having another favorite soul healer tank, it's been really nice to have Cheesy in the raids too. Having two people that can dedicate a tank or whatever.
yeah. So with hardcore and like a pure dedicated tank isn't as useful, whether it's a warlock or whether it's like a paladin. It's very niche situations, and so healer favorite soul 17 favorites, still 3 paladin or fighter, healer tanks that are chaw base and can int him and have 4.5k HP. All of those are really, really, really good to provide that tankiness and have those healing abilities as well.
It's pretty interesting too, because like Cheesy and I are very similar as far as defenses and stuff like that, but our builds are like we have a couple of differences in build, like as far as even just gear. Like he's also 3 paladin, I'm 3 fighter and stuff like that. It's kind of just cool to see like the differences like that can not make a huge difference, but enough to make it feel like they do matter in a way.
It gives like identification and diversity of what builds are. And one thing that DDO really focuses on that other MMOs can't capture as well. Generally, there's like just a top tier. This is what you play. This is how you play it. This is your best in slot gear. And in DDO, even at the top end, different people value different things. And so you start going into these like balancing acts of what your gear looks like, what your build looks like, and these little trade offs that you do. And it's what aligns it more towards Path of Exile, which is a really different genre. Being an ARPG and top down, but its building is so great. It's one thing I really do enjoy about DDO.
Yeah, definitely. Like I think that's one of the things that keeps DDO relevant, even with all of their issues that they have, is the fact that their building is so unique compared to other games and stuff like that. And that and like their 3D movement and stuff like that is what does it for me at least.
Yeah, no game has come close. The closest game to DDO and that was like old City of Villains and City of Heroes way back in the day in like
That game was
2008.
fun.
Right, those were those were the closest things like really to it. But a full like an MMO that is full action and no tab target, there are very few out there. One thing that does like one of these things that diversifies these builds is the gearing, and that's why we are doing these raids. We're getting uh, threads of fate to get raid fills, and we never thought that would even be possible. Like when going through gear and such,
I know.
we were like, no, we're not going to get raid fills. We don't have to worry about those. And now we're like, I've gotten one, you've gotten one. We're coming up on our second here soon. And then along with that is the name drops that happen, and then even runes to get those, especially with people sponsoring
Yeah,
timers. Like we're like halfway to getting our our first dryad runes to get an
uh,
item.
we're like over halfway, aren't we?
Yeah, just about. I think we're 6 out of 10 runs needed.
I know you're considering saving up to get a like a Fate Twisted raid item,
Yeah,
but like, and I've already got like, I think I want the Intim trinket out of there, but other than that, I got like the item I care about. I got an affirmation swap on hardcore, which is fucking sweet.
huge, especially for a tank that you're taking so much damage. Now you're able to keep another 100 temp HP just up, which makes it so people are taking damage, but you don't want to have to worry about your HP literally at all. Not that your 4.5k HP had any worries. Now you're up to 5.5,
Yeah,
and you can just ignore yourself completely and just dedicate all of your focus onto healing others.
definitely.
It's a really nice swap to have.
Oh yeah, 100%. And
And
then like you, for example, have already gotten a raid weapon, and I know uh Scully's also got like her like best in slot raid weapon and stuff like that. It's like we're getting people on hardcore with fucking raid weapons and stuff. It's something we've never seen before, which is really fucking cool to see. Just like the power that people are getting this hardcore compared to previous hardcores.
right, and with that, like first hardcore, raids were not even talked about. It was like even so to do heroic raids. And it was like a lot more nerve wracking. And then as hardcores have gone on, people got more comfortable doing Tempest Spines for favor, doing Babas for favor, stuff like that. And now we're actually farming for gear just to make Reapers and make everything a lot more fluid. Like you just mentioned, a Skull Priestess from Arganessen. One of the great things about hardcore is that everybody gets to come together. She's playing a longsword Vanguard pure paladin, and her best in slot weapon is the Bitter Edge from Dryad, and we dropped one and she got it, which is fantastic. Um, and it just enables her to do so much more and it feels really good. She was super excited when she got it. Uh, and like Maury said, I got the Wicked Blade, and that's one of
Yeah. Oh,
because there are very few 2-weapon fighting builds, let alone single weapon fighting builds on hardcore. Almost everyone's either hand and a half or two-handed fighting for weapon DPS. or now
And
ranged with
make
range changes.
it makes me think like next hardcore or something like maybe like a swash bard or something like that, or like just like a single weapon fighting barbarians more like of an actual consideration because you could actually like reasonably get that hand axe, right?
Right.
You could like
We
weapons become much less of an issue. We can actually get the raid items.
we literally had a hand X drop, and it doesn't eke out damage on my build, and so I didn't try to get it. And I think the person fed it. Like we literally fed a raid hand axe, or they just saved it, but it could be fed because there's no one in an entire raid that could use that. And so now you can find these niche builds that really hyper focus on one thing. And like mine's sort of in between where I focus on AoE while leveling up and while gearing with Dance of Death, but now I've switched over to Ascendancy or
Ascendancy.
to Kodic, full Kodic, removing my AoE, but really focusing on that single target because most of my content that I'm interacting with now rewards that single target. Gonna start doing Reapers soon, so Ascendancy stacking that extra melee power is amazing. I have 2 cleaves. I have confront any foe, fully ret, and all a dire charge for all that AoE, and that's really enough. And then now I can just hyper focus on single target, which is what the 2 weapon fighting build uh, goes with, and that's why I went to the Wicked Blade and actually swapped out blinding speed. I have to chug haste pots all of the time, or get our wizard to throw haste on me every 2 minutes.
Yeah, like oh, I just love the prospect of being able to do raids on hardcore because like going back and thinking about it, it's like it opens up so many builds options. Like I'm literally thinking about trying to play like a single weapon fighting build next season if I'm around and stuff like that, just because it just sounds rad as hell. Like being able to play a build on that level, right? Like of course there's still some raid items we won't reasonably go for or be able to get, so it still blocks out some builds. Like for example, Strahd is one that's not getting run just because of the fact of the grip. So running like a Vistani still I don't think is ideal, especially with now that people can get raid weapons. It actually makes some builds like worse in the prospect of hardcore. For example, like I said, Vistani's because like you can't get pain and suffering, so you're just dramatically worse damage than like a single weapon fighting barb or whatever. And that's kind of what you're supposed to be doing is single weapon or single target damage on a Vistani. So I don't know
They
in
both
that aspect.
Vistani and single weapon fighting builds both accomplish the same thing with the single target damage. How they do it is different, and with the double strike changes that recently happened, uh, and like crunching all the numbers down, 2 weapon fighting got a huge buff because they got more double strike on their offhand, and melee in general got a big buff because whenever you double strike a crit, it automatically recrits. And so, like, it's nice for all that, but there's that trade off of you're only be able to use moon slices. Pretty much, I think it's the highest base damage dagger,
Hmm.
and not pain suffering versus a raid hand axe or Kopesh from Dryad
Dryad.
on a single target weapon build.
Dryad just has a lot of good fucking items for
It is definitely very loaded, and like you said, we got a Fate Twisted, greater Fate Twisted chest, which is the first one that I've ever
which is
seen.
insane. Sadly, we got skunked on it, but it was really fucking awesome to see on hardcore. I was like I was actually excited. Like it
Hmm.
was kind of
Yeah, it is like greater Fate Twisted chest for how much we harp on them. They do provide that really chase item, chase focus, and while that can be really good, there's a more positive way, at least we think, that you can implement that. And so, but seeing it, especially for the first time, it was rarely like, oh man, this could be really big. There's a Morning Star out of there that would be best in slot for my literally Morning Star build. There's there's a bunch of different items that everybody else was like, ooh, what if you can make entire builds, you can TR down and do an entire new build with around an item that is so chase like that. And I don't think anybody would be like, well, you could do that, or you could just not. But it's like, get an item that's so big, you build entirely around it.
yeah. I also think the prospect of, like the greater fate twisted chest is better with hardcore because we're not actively searching for items out of the greater fate chest like all the time. So it's
Right.
not like on live where you're like fucking finally I got a greater fate twist. Hopefully I'll get the item I've been wanting for forever. It's like it's just an added bonus like oh fucking sweet we got a greater fate twisted chest. That's awesome.
Right. The
Instead of being like oh thank fuck we finally got it.
right, your goals are different, and thus how you interact with the same content is different, which is what hardcore all about. Your goals of on live or running through quests as fast as possible, being super efficient while doing lives, or doing these things in more casual way, more casual manner without much risk. And now it's like, okay, we got to do every single quest. We got to do it without dying. We got to really hyper focus on the build, and it breathes new life into the game. That's why we both really enjoy hardcore enjoyable content in the entire game for us. Oh, you're muted.
Well, oops. All I said was absolutely, absolutely.
Uh, so Dryad, probably the most rewarding raid that we've been doing. We've also been doing Baba, which is nice. There's a few chase items out of there. Tremor, uh,
Chrism's a big one for some people.
Chrism would be really big for any two-handed fighting build, which is probably the strongest melee builds in the game right now.
Which
And
now
then Thorn
I
as
think
well.
the only two-handed fighting build at 30 now, since Grun literally died not even an hour ago.
Right, just
I
before
think
we
it's
started.
Thune, so
Just before we started, one of the core members in Dom's Reaper Wings push, playing a wolf, he ended up dying to rolling a 1 on a big disintegrate at the end of an R4 good intentions and got hit for 2300 damage. And it was just poof, all gone. And he was already playing a little bit more offensive focused, just about 2k HP. And this is where like that build trade-off is there, because I'm more single target focused and can deal, I don't know about comparable damage, but we're both doing the same thing. We're doing a lot of damage, especially because I'm using a raid weapon now. But I have 300 more HP than him and more defenses. So that's where that trade-off happens. Morgan and I even looked last night about trying to re-gear my entire set to be like hyper offensive focused, and ultimately came to the conclusion of just not valuing it as much. You have to force too many things much.
there's too many big items, and it's just weird to try and fit it all, stuff like that.
Yeah. Another weird sort of chase item prospect that we saw from Baba was, like was it just said Thune or Thunes who Galthune, there we go. Who is uh is the Honda damage barbarian. Him and Dom, being a two-handed fighting paladin, are the only two-handed fighters at endgame now. And Thune's got a vestments, the light armor, and turned that into one of
Oh yeah,
three
an Og, that's so cool.
sneak attack damage dogs. And so like these items that these systems that are in place that are more focused on live are now suddenly seeing a little bit of
Attention.
like potential on hardcore. And so now, as we're doing these raids, we're like, okay, want to do, now we're able to feed those to Thunes, and he can suddenly get 3 more sneak die and doing a set og on hardcore, which is just a crazy idea, but it really shows to that like the development of the player knowledge and what is possible, making that happen.
It even like things like this too even opens up the ideas of like maybe playing even like a thrower, right? Like a lot of the problem with throwers was there's just no weapons to use, but like
You return to sender, and that's it.
now like getting the Baba dagger is easy. Like we got one with M2 on it literally 2 nights ago, and I was like, man, if I wasn't important to our static and playing a healer, I would totally take that shit in TR and do a fucking thrower.
Yeah, that or
'Cause-
the like a Shuri thrower as well. We've seen a couple shurikens drop from
Yeah.
Dryad.
Like I don't know, and like I think that normal PN, if we had like a range DPS, wouldn't be that bad either. I think we're not doing it because we currently don't have like any range damage for Urk, so it's just kind of like
Pretty much.
we can't really kill Urk. So,
That is one
but
thing that, like with the prospect of raids, because raids are such a core part of MMOs, that people are now trying to build specifically for that. Like we had a ranger coming up, that ended up dying to lag in literally the same lag instance out in the cogs as a pure tank paladin, so we could do VOD, and so that would open up VOD and PN to suddenly do these raids that have like really chase items using tail, using lamplighter, all the items from uh PN.
Ripcore again.
Ripcore again. Yeah, but he's on the feeling good favored soul. Coast right on up. It'll all be good.
I have faith in him. This is the one.
Time.
I told him he should have played Warlock.
At a certain point, like
It's free.
we're not the biggest fan of Warlock, but it does do its job very, very, very
It
well.
lives.
Yeah, and when that's the goal, then that's the goal. And so,
It was just a shame, man, because they literally like Core was literally piking every quest just to like make sure he lived, and it lags out in a Slayer area, man. Like, oh man,
I think he just got his Sharon gear on as well, and so we lost all that. And then, yeah, the lag is such a demoralizing thing to do. Like
yeah,
dying to something like rolling a 1 on Disintegrate, getting immediately bopped, then be like, okay, this was a build decision. It's within the realm of like it's on the low end of what's possible, but it's within that realm. It sucks, but at least you can own it and be like, yeah, that's what happens when you take these steps, and this is why taking these steps does have risk. Versus lag, where it's just like there's a 1.2k HP tank with 200 PRR and 100 plus MRR in heroic cogs that's just getting eaten alive, and you can't do anything. Spamming teleports out, spamming lay on hands. It's just not doing anything. It just feels
literally
so
cast
bad.
2 teleports, and not a single one went off. It was that death was hard to watch.
Yeah, and you mentioned something in one of the previous episodes of, you know, some people may find it annoying or repetitive to go back on this lag conversation every single time. And while that can be the case, until it is sorted, until it has been properly addressed, and there have been meaningful steps to taken to on the
Fix it.
SSG side to
We'll
get to sort it
mention
out,
it every episode.
yeah, it's going to be a common point in the game, and thus it is a common point when you're talking about the game. If I'm talking to someone that's trying to get into the game, you have to mention lag, otherwise it's very dishonest. Be like, yeah, no, DDo's fantastic. It's got a dedicated community, lots of content. Its systems are different. Its build and character progression are very rewarding, and it also lags like a motherfucker, and that just blows to have to put out there. But it's a part of the game.
Like explain hardcore to someone and be like, yeah, it's really cool. You get this one life. It's really awesome like that, and there's like a 50% chance you'll die to lag.
Yeah, yeah, and so.
Like we're at
When
the point where like we lock up in like an EE quest. We're like, is it time? Is
Yep.
it time?
Yep. Every single like when we're doing Charm sagas for uh artifact rewards, which we'll be doing here after this recording, and even in the past when I'm doing it, try to just get everyone in the group their artifacts. We'll do or Charm Welcome, which has Gentorius for just at the end fight is just can lag. It can lag really hard. It can lag really softly. But it almost always locks up, and every single time you're just fighting the mobs, and then it just stops for like half a second, and you know what's coming, and it's like, oh, are we dead? Start slamming your meld key. Start just immediately trying to get to safe spots. Just do everything that you
And I'm
can
not
not
even
to die.
using meld.
Right.
I'm playing Crusade for the boys.
And so it's just such a weird interaction within the game, and like it's a feature at this point, right? Like it's a meme that's a feature, but it actually is because it's such a mainstay and it's a consistent thing. You can go into a quest and go, yeah, at this point in this quest, it lags.
Yeah,
So wonky.
yeah.
And so you avoid that. There's ways to mitigate play around it. You don't do certain quests. You do certain quests on lower difficulties. Even changing up gear sets and going, I don't really want to do this gear set because it has this piece of gear and this quest is a little
Yeah. Feels
so
bad.
does. Um Finishing out the raids talk where it doesn't lag. Thankfully, we haven't gotten much lag. Maybe at the end of a really heavy push raid evening, we were getting a little bit of stutters on dryads, but that's pretty much it. Some of the older content, Legendary Tempest Spine, 13 runes, Legendary Hawks, it's like 6 runes or something. Just a little bit
LTS
there.
5 minute raid.
Yeah.
Not even like
Yeah, it's very fast, pretty easy. Legendary normal really hasn't scaled super big, but it's one thing that I do enjoy about DDO is that these raids that have come out a long, long time ago still have some relevancy, and especially with
Mhm.
their potential thoughts of like say updating Ravenloft to the current gear level 34 around Sharn around Feywild, and continuing that going wide a mentality, which has its benefits, has its downsides. We can talk about that later. Um, but updating and having this large slew of available content is a really cool thing. It's something that a lot of MMOs forego for the expansion content of new expansion, new raid tier, new things. All the other previous gear is sort of invalidated.
Definitely.
Yeah, and so seeing what would you think about like seeing some of these like really high like these raids that are like raids, right? They're not just one off, they're not entire packs, they're not anything like that. It's just a raid that is updated and trying to keep all the raids along the same tier.
Raids, I think that's kind of okay. I think it's cool to like update the raid items and keep the raid items better. I don't necessarily want the like regular old quests items to all be updated. Like I don't think that other than like the raid items, or I don't think you should be able to go and just farm like a better set from Ravenloft than you could from Sharn. You know, like because they went and updated the items and made them just as good, right?
Mhm. Well, they would provide different things, and there would be different emphasis on whatever your build is. But there would become a like this set is really 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 good
Yeah,
for this
I kind of
specific
like
build.
the prospect though of like as these expansions comes out, the dungeon gear gets better, but the raid gear from all the other raids are still better though, right? Like, because like if you're
Yeah,
just if you didn't do any raids or whatever, the Feywild gear is probably like your best options for a lot of things, right?
yeah. It provides the most
So
like
like
bang for your buck.
it is kind of doing that like already, right? So and I think it's not necessarily a bad model, but then again, I'm the higher end likes to do raids, shit like that. So I have full raid sets.
Yeah, and the idea behind I think at the core of this it becomes build defining, right? That's what you're talking about. You
Hmm.
don't want exactly easily accessible build defining, like very little energy and input and investment into a super build defining and now very top tier thing. You want there to be some progression along. Go do this
Yeah.
content. You use this content to go do more content. It's the PVE cycle of you get gear to get better gear and use that better gear to get better gear, and you continue to evolve that way.
Yeah. Like it feels like this go wide mentality kind of is it's gonna eventually hit a wall in my you're gonna run out of options and you're gonna have everything made and I just like I what are they gonna do after that? Like I've only ever played MMOs that don't try and go wide, and it's for this reason because it works for a while, but you're gonna run out. Like it's gonna stop. Like
Yeah. So let's just think. DDO's been going wide for the past. I guess it's like major go wide, like the full commit to go wide was Feywild because they went from Sharn, which came out about 3 years ago, and then they put Feywild out, and they decided to actively say we're going to keep it on the same level as Sharn versus Ravenloft to Sharn, where there was an increase. And while it was gradual, and while there is some Ravenloft gear that is big, those are build defining pieces of gear, Pain and Suffering, Tremor, things like that, Chrism, these raid pieces of gear, which we do like that exception of sort of slowly build up or invalidate previous expansions, previous sets, but then have those raids and those build defining things be good. That choice to go wide has already bit them in their focuses as they wanted to increase level cap. They were talking about going to 32 with the idea of eventually going to 30 or to 40 or to 35 or something like that. And then they went, okay, we can't do this. And while they didn't put out a express reason, I think it is very, very plain to see that if you increase the level cap, that means you have to increase gear exponentially. You have to go, okay, we're not just increasing or just gradually increasing a next pack or a next expansion. We're literally invalidating pretty much everything that's below to put a new tier out. And so now you're taking all of your previous content of raids, all of your previous like Sharn, Feywild, even some Ravenloft content, all the different packs that have come out, and just wiping the slate clean. And because UDO's already gone wide in some fashion for so long, they would lose so much content that they couldn't recoup it. Like you're talking about, those are sort of the downsides.
yeah, it's really hard at this point because they just don't have the power as a company to go back and make all the stuff they'd have to do to make it like relevant with a complete reset, which is like it's a big issue because like they're kind of now just playing for the short game and trying to survive because it's like what are you gonna do? You're gonna run into that wall sooner or later where you don't have any other options and like I don't like I'm not a fucking developer. I can't give them any more solutions, stuff like that. Like I don't know what the fuck they're gonna do to keep going wide if that's their options. But like I think eventually they're gonna have to raise the level cap But the problem is now with them choosing to go wide, they're just widening the gap what they have to do even further, right? You're
Right.
helping in the short term, you're not, and you're making the long term worse, in my opinion.
Dig in your own grave, sort of.
Hmm.
And so yeah, and like you just mentioned, which was a very good thing to point on, is that when there's an issue and when a community member, when someone that is a player sort of identifies an issue and brings that up, that's one thing. But then the natural progression is okay, try to figure out what solutions could we come up with, and that's something that's getting harder and harder to do. Of you can see these issues that are cropping up, but what the actual systems and thought that needs to go in to the game to address and to at least partially address, if not completely solve that issue, is getting less and less feasible.
Hmm.
And that's a rough spot to be in. It doesn't inspire a ton of confidence. There's an idea behind storytelling that you give the audience. So say you're watching a movie, you give the audience information that the characters wouldn't know, and so it makes you feel like you're invested into it, and you know something, and you're like, oh, well, this is going to happen. Oh, this character doesn't know what's going to happen about it, and then that's where you get twists where you know something, but it's the wrong thing, and they've intentionally misled you, and that creates its own environment. But now there's such it's like barrier to entry and high level content. There's such as like we don't know what's going on for on SSG side. We don't know how it's going to be sorted. We don't know the thought process, and we can't really come up with a ton of content that or solutions to this issue that would properly address this.
Yeah, it's like it's a pretty scary thing for the thought of the game's health in the future because like I feel like there is no possible way other than leveling raising level cap at some point. I think you absolutely have to. I don't think there's another way. I don't think you can keep going wide if you want your game to be sustainable at like at a later point. So it's just like I don't know what they're gonna do unless they like realize that really fucking soon.
Yeah, one thing that we can talk about, and that while it doesn't address that issue of this like looming going wide potential and how they're going to address that, is the other systems within DDO that are lacking, that don't hold player retention, that are present in other MMOs that aren't in this one. And one of those that seems to be very, very common throughout almost all MMOs and that is severely lacking in DDO is PvP. That's an entire facet of games that has an entire or like target audience that people like don't play the game to do raids or do all these things. They play it to PvP and have that combat interaction. Oh, you made it.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Like with the power of PvP now or whatever, it's just so like even if it's what you like to do or whatever, it's so the power creep is just so insane that everyone's just gonna be one shotting everyone.
Right. Wait.
So like they'd have to maybe go through and make some like PvP implemented scaling or stuff like that to make it viable. But I think it's almost worth doing because it creates a whole other element of the game, which is like really fun. I remember back in the day, just sitting in the Wayward Lobster, just like brawling people was like one of the things I spent the most time doing because it was just fun.
I would I would sell. I remember distinctly. Oh man, I'm out of mana pots, or I'm out of, or like the elixirs that you can drink that gives you mana over time, which was a core thing. You plug one of those before your fights and keep them up if it's a longer fight. Otherwise, you run out of mana and then you die. Can't heal, can't do damage. I sold like a tenderizer on my melee just to get plat to do that because I didn't want to go out and run quests to get plat or play the auction house or anything like that. And I even like just until recently I was still looking for a new tenderizer to glamour to have that be there. But I sold one such a long time ago. And yeah, I completely agree that PvP was fantastic. I had a level 14 twink, I had my max level tunes, everyone had their own interactions. They had their different matchups. There was an entire PvP meta, and it was
Dwarf
all
clerics casting Cometfall.
and searing lights and spamming heals when they're blue scale. Oh my goodness. It
Oh
was
man.
all really organic, which was such a cool feeling to have. It wasn't like PvP was this thing. It was like PvP was this thing that was just sort of added in and did really well. And then you'd see over time that PvP was not a main focus of DDO. It wasn't something that
Yeah.
was really like intended to be there
Yeah.
and built around.
It was really cool, but yeah, it was absolutely not intended or anything like that. So it made it a lot more difficult, I guess, to care about it, and then it just became a non-factor. Like like the lobster, all that shit, it's just dead. Like no one goes there and fucking mess
The
around anymore.
the most population that it gets is on hardcore when people make silly names and
Yeah,
off each other, or make level
yeah,
one
that's
tunes to
really
kill level
funny.
30 tunes, level 20 tunes
I
for you
never
and
did, never did that, never
never.
did that, not once. My hardcore season 2 character definitely didn't get killed by your mom. Lol.
Yeah, you and your cousin. Good. Um,
That was good.
but with that, so we've identified something that is not present in DDO, and the reason why it isn't present hasn't been a focus. It wasn't built with the intent of it. DDO or PvP wasn't an integral part of uh, launch on DDO. I remember going onto Lamania, and the first pit that was really up was the Phoenix Tavern in the
Oh
market,
yeah.
and you'd have ramps instead of the ladders that are there now. They were literally ramps. People would go down, cast chain lightning, and go back up into safety. And it was cheesy, but it was the first interaction that they removed the ramps, put ladders in, and so you have these like the slow iteration. It was a lot of fun, and like especially for at least like I would say the younger generation really enjoyed that PvP
Oh
element of
yeah.
it, and that makes sense. There's a little bit more competitiveness and sort of like that idea of asserting dominance, stuff like that.
Being OP.
Being OP, yeah, going out and farming an ear dweller for double damage and popping that, and then yeah, um, and so you have these like really fun times and these things that or facilitated a positive interaction with the game or impact on the game, and now that just isn't there. And so, what would it look like to bring back PvP? What are some things on your mind that sort of would put that back in?
I like I feel like at this point, like I said, they'd have to do like very custom scaling for it and stuff like that, which unfortunately I don't think they have the power as a company to do, just because the way the game has changed or whatever. It's gonna be so difficult to change, like without actually scaling PvP and stuff like that. It's gonna be so difficult to make it relevant, you know?
Yeah, practically, it's a little late to try to pivot towards having the PvP as a core aspect. So let's go like not as practically and more of just like spitballing ideas, sort of putting out there. So one idea is putting a PvP scaling in that does try to level
Yeah.
things down to an ideal sweet spot of not getting one shot, but not having these tank fests that have healing being overpowered or a specific like a damage being overpowered, stuff like that.
Yeah, let's see then. What I don't know, maybe adding more of those like modes they used to have, like the old capture the flag thing was really fun, right? Stuff like that, like making stuff matter or whatever, right?
Yeah, so you have currently, I think they're still in the game. You have capture the flag in larger arenas where you go in, try to get the opponent's flag, and then run back to yours. And then you'd have deathmatch, which was in a team environment and in a like free for all environment. And so adding a system in
Yeah.
that would either put a leaderboards on those or to incentivize that, putting in rewards at certain tiers or points into that leaderboards, a ranking system, that sort of ideal. And then creating an API, creating a like looking there's a loop looking for group tab, there's looking for PvP tab of making
Be cool.
challenges, having a casual and a rated PvP like auto queue system.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. If there's like a queue thing, or whatever, and like I know they can't do it, but if they could do something like a cross server thing where you could queue into like other servers or whatever, because then it creates more of that competitive environment of like, man, this server is the best at PvP because we're we have the best teams, or it'd be kind of cool, right? It's like again non-practical thing, but it'd be really cool to see, right? Like, oh yeah, like Kyber fucking shits on these other servers in PvP. We're so much better than them, right?
Or vice versa. Like Kyber is very known for its endgame PvE environment, and so if it just doesn't have the people that are interested in PvP, but say like Cannith or Orion does, then having that and like when we go into this arena, this cross server arena in ones or in twos or in threes, you'd have newbie Karba dash Kyber, and suddenly you'd see someone on Orion or Cannith and be like, "Fuck! Well, we're in for a rough battle and uphill climb against this team." That'd be a really cool thing to sort of reintroduce into the game.
Yeah, I think that'd be awesome, actually.
Yeah, whether it's plausible or not with cross server interaction, uh, we'd have to see. But just having it that as an idea would be really interesting. I would so one thing that sort of does push on the more practical side. And while it doesn't help the cross server aspect, which I do think would almost be mandatory with the limited player base that DDO has, uh, talking about PvP scaling, making a centralized power point, right? Going, you have brackets of PvP. You have level 5
Oh yeah,
PvP, you have level 12 PvP, level 20 PvP. And then having like limiting what power people can get, limiting the gear, limiting the destinies, limiting all of these things that would cause balance issues.
yeah, that'd be really sweet to see something like that. Like it'd be really cool to like see what's best at level 12 could be completely different than what's best at level 8 or whatever the other bracket is. Like and create metas and meta defining things, which you know is something I always love given the way I play games.
Right, at a very high level and trying to like push the limits of what's available. And one thing that it really emphasizes on with DDO and helps with DDO, and takes advantage of, is the uh, building, just builds in general. Like DDO focuses around your build progression and your character development. That if you get to the point where that's what matters, you have player skill and you have builds, and those are the two elements that go into this mode. You can really put all of your knowledge into that build side, and even if you're not as skillful, if you have a better build, then that will
Then
help
you a lot
edge.
of times, yeah, definitely because like if someone brings a non monk hand wrap build into it, yeah, I don't really care how bad you are, you're probably gonna win.
Right, right. Yeah, is if the meta, you can shake up the meta with your knowledge, or you have these like older players that did do PvP that have this baseline knowledge of, oh, you know how powerful favorite souls and clerics are, or how like Warforged Sorks and Wizards are really stand out. At least they were, and then we come in with that understanding versus newer players that or players that are really focused on this meta now, of just like understanding builds and going, okay, well, now at this bracket at level 12 in heroics, this is really good, but then at level 20, when you have access to different build defining things, now this is really good.
Yeah, definitely. It's like yeah, I think it would create a lot of interesting interactions and stuff like that. Because some things that used to be good may also just be really bad now. And
Right.
obviously there'd be some stuff that like I'd want to see removed from PvP. Like I don't want to get like power word stunned or something like that because that's just
Power word
fucking
count.
lame.
Right. There was always a big death mark on anyone who was going around power word stunning or killing people. They just got X-nayed and not PvP because everyone would gank them.
But like things like finger of death ward, that's still fine, right? Because if you're not slotting death ward in your build, that's kind of your fucking fault.
Right. If you're going against a caster, then that's a downside that you have to really pay attention to. Otherwise, get bopped. And what this also opens up and facilitates is community interaction. And what I mean by that is not only that, like ideally with cross server, you'd have more people interacting with each other. So like the hardcore server, that idea of a mega server is such a attractive idea because it just brings the entire community together and makes it so you're not gated behind like the servers, which is a very old archaic thing. Most of the time now, let's say like WoW, you can do almost everything in the same across server, except for the highest of high level
Yeah.
stuff, which does require a ton of investment. And so I think that that's okay.
Uh,
What?
on that topic, I really think that for the health of the game of DDO, I think that they need to really look at making a mega server an actual thing in the future.
Yeah,
Like if you look
putting
at hardcore and like the community aspect of it or whatever, just everyone being together from all these servers already just makes it feel so much better. Like seeing all the servers come together, I think would be a really good thing. It makes people like less stressful about having to transfer their characters or whatever to play with their friends because people on their server stopped or whatever. Stuff like that, right? Like, if you have a dead server, it's so hard to get off of because of how invested you are on that server and how much stuff you have. You can't transfer it all, stuff like that.
right. I've done one server transfer my entire time. I played on Fernia when that was when the first we had all the servers and they got condensed down. Then I played on Galanda, and then
Fernia represent.
right, and then I moved from Galanda to Kyber because that's where friends were. That's where the environment that I wanted to play in was, and it took me like 6 hours and 7 months of deliberation. 6 hours of like once I actually decided to move everything onto my character, everything I wanted to bring, and I still have a ton of things, level 30s, a bunch of past lives on Galanda, and uh, And it still took like
Yeah.
all that time to figure out like, oh, do I want to make this choice? And I'm glad that I did, but it's still such a taxing and like that there's a trade-off. I'm not able to play with people in Galanda. My guild that I've been in for 14 years is on that server. My family plays on that server. And so it's that big trade-off.
Yeah, like, cause I definitely like I told myself, yeah, I'll still go back to Galanda and play my characters over there right now and stuff, and I haven't touched them since I moved to Kyber.
I think I've been over there twice. I think I've been on like from the hard actually from hardcore people that I've met on hardcore. I've played on their servers more, transferring my character from hardcore season 3 over to Arganessen and playing on that more than I have on my original home server. So crazy idea, the massively multiplayer aspect of an MMO is the most important thing. That social aspect is what
Mhm.
dictates so much about the game.
Definitely, like 100%.
The mega server I think would just be it'd be awesome to see being able to play with all these people again, and then like it really breeds the competition more, right? Like of actually and like you know just breeding more competition of like we got the server first here or whatever, right? Instead of
Right, we
things
got
like that.
you have the idea behind that it's like high end competition of world's first of like just first thing to happen in GDO. There recently there's been this back and forth between lava divers and a amalgamation of guilds.
Ascension.
No, it's actually an Arganessen
Oh,
guild that of from Synergia and Degenerate Matter. There's a few different guilds that have come together because they just don't have that core mega guild like Kyber does for in lava divers. That lava divers post or put a high Reaper no cheese Dryad run,
Dread.
and then Arganessen came in and suddenly sort of changed how they approached Dryad and did like a really really fast run, super high damage, and they got R8, and now lava divers came back with R9, and now there's suddenly a race for that first R10 going on.
Yeah, it's awesome to see, right? Like that's the kind of stuff that makes raiding in games fun. Whenever you're pushing for like, because I play WoW pretty like competitively for a while, right? And I remember like pushing for the server first. Like there's obviously friendly banter and stuff like that. Back in what was the expansion? Mists of Pandaria, the last raid, Siege of Orgrimmar. The guild I was in, I didn't raid with them at the time. Was Baddies, and there was another guild in the server named Peachy Keen, and everyone thought Peachy Keen was gonna kill it. Like the night before we raided, everyone thought it was dead or whatever, and they didn't end up killing it. And I remember, and we went in the next night and we killed it. I remember the fucking meme in general chat and trade chat for the next like month was Grats Peachy Keen. Oh,
Perfect.
it was it was really like it was pretty mean, but
I
it
mean, but
was just banter.
right, it's that competitive banter, which is a part of it. It's not like, oh yeah, actually just rag on these people to tell them that they're terrible, but it evolves
Yeah,
with the community and is
it
facilitated
was
with it.
mostly just because like everyone counted out our guild already, right? Everyone was like, "There's no way they get it already." Everyone was already saying "Grats, Peachy Keen." So whenever we ended up getting it, it was, "Well, yeah, grats, Peachy Keen,
Yeah,
grats, guys."
yeah, and
Then we came.
it has that sting, but that in turn makes it so Peachy Keen can come back from that and be like, okay, now we know what defeat tastes like. Let's push that, like have that more motivation to
Oh yeah, it was
forward.
really cool to see, right?
Yeah,
And
and
then obvious. Yeah.
good.
No, no, my point wasn't going anywhere.
Ultimately, like a lot of like what we're talking about, like there's competitive banter and then there's people being asses, right? And there's a big difference between that. If you're in if you're in any environment, if you're being hyper negative and doing so at the detriment of others, that has no benefit or there isn't any back and forth, there isn't any mutual understanding. You're just being a fucking dick. Then you need to get out. You need to go understand like what you're doing has negative ramifications. And a lot of the times, like I don't play with people that are just strictly hyper negative. It's not my play
Oh yeah.
style. It's not my place to be, and it doesn't provide anything for me for the overall community. It's not positive, not healthy, and competitiveness often brings that out in people. Egos get involved, egos get hurt. Suddenly, you have grudges, stuff like that. It's hyper focused in the competitive environment, and so competitive players can get a bad rap. In all my time of playing in competition and playing on teams, playing in signed teams, very, very, very little of that at the very highest level actually shows up. Everybody is pretty mutually understanding, try to be positive towards each other. And although it may sting losing a tournament in the final round at a very close call, that can hurt and it can be demoralizing at times. You still have to try to pick yourself up, and especially for the other team, where you go, yeah, that was a good game. Try to be a good sport and
Yeah,
progress
and
the
a
scene
lot
as
of
a
it's
whole.
just like understanding, like you know when it's gonna be banter or not, right? Like a pretty big streamer I watch for Apex games, for example, is a guy named Imperial Hal or whatever. Like, and like he'll like play in a tournament or whatever and kill like one of his buddies on a different team and it's like, yeah, fucking trash. Obviously, like he thinks they're very good. He plays with them all the time, but it's just a joke or stuff like that. And just like, or along the lines of, in quote, being negative. If you've never played in the really competitive environment and stuff like that, a lot of people will take like constructive criticism or whatever as just being toxic or whatever, right? Like another example with Hal is they'll lose a game or whatever, and he'll be like, "Yo, why did you do that? Why did you push this team? We should have done this." And a lot of people are like, "Why is Hal being toxic?" Whatever. It's like it's not that they're pro players. He expects them to be pro players.
It's like that. It's a mutual understanding. There's a precedent set for them and their team where you want to be making the best choices as possible. And so when that isn't met, when suddenly there is a right answer and the wrong one was chosen, you have to get very, very pointed at that, especially for Hal and for professional players where your livelihood and your contract is on the line.
Definitely,
Yeah.
definitely veered off. Accidentally veered off of DDO a bit, but it was just
It
kind of a good point to bring in the competitive side of things. And
I think it actually ties in with what I'll be talking about next, and that's the idea of bringing competitive and really emphasizing that in DDO and having it be like competitiveness and competitive like avenues in games have cannot be really forced in games. The most natural ones, CS:GO and StarCraft and all this, come from the community. There has to be a general understanding of, okay, we want to be competitive, and we're going to make that happen. We're going to make our own leagues. We're going to make our own things, and that isn't really showing up in DDO right now. There isn't as much of a drive to do so. An example of this is say like HOTS, Heroes of the Storm from Blizzard. It got
yep,
pushed. I know Morgy has a very special spot for that.
I was a pro player, man.
Yeah, it Blizzard had the idea of having a competitive league. Same thing as with Overwatch League of, okay, we're gonna make these games, make these leagues, and try to really force them. And it didn't work out very well. There was a competitive environment for uh, Overwatch. HOTS was sort of made for that competitive focus, and HOTS has since it's all its competitive sponsorships from Blizzard has stopped. The Overwatch League decided to go with the franchising route of tying teams to cities like the Philadelphia Eagles or like the New England Patriots or the football teams or the uh or what is a baseball team?
The St. Louis Cardinals.
There you go, St. Louis Cardinals. And it ties a physical team to a physical place, which helps sort of create identity. But in Overwatch, in when you have players from all over the world, all over the country, suddenly tied to a specific city, it doesn't do anything, and so that was a little bit of a misstep and didn't make a ton of sense. But in DDO, there's this competitive aspect on PVE, but there isn't a PvP competitive aspect. And one of the reasons that it takes so much time and energy to actually make a tournament, but they are doable. And seeing a community tournament, which is something that we've lightly talked on, we'll talk on a little bit more here, talked on in general chats and in private, what the idea of a community tournament would look like, a PvP
Yeah.
tournament that is specifically.
Oh, you want to go to the PvP side? Yeah. For
Yeah.
DDO, um, yeah, we talked about doing stuff along the lines of like making an iconic character, level 15 or whatever. You can only use the iconic gear and stuff like that. And like that's one of the better ways to do something along those lines is just because the iconic heroes, you're starting with a baseline set of gear, which isn't, you know, crazy overpowered stuff like that. You're all 15, you don't have a ton of lives. So like you might be able to get where you're not just one shotty. Like I still think you might run into some issues like that, but I think that's one of like your only ways to create something like that in the current state of DDO.
Yeah, and so it's sort of on the community side and creating this idea of this tournament. It'd be trying to work with what we have available now, and then showing that there is interest or finding that there isn't interest, and it going from there. And so, like Morgan said, create an iconic character. You have level 15. You can do any split that you want. You can't invest any money into it because especially in a PvP environment, there's some arguments to be made. Pay to win in a PvE environment, it doesn't really impact anyone because it's all versus enemy or all versus NPCs, all versus in the environment. But in PvP, there is a direct pay to win aspect. And so it'd be create an iconic. You cannot invest anything for the GDO store into it. No outside previous account things,
No
no
plot,
historic
no
items,
nothing.
no nothing, right? You have your items on iconics, and then it'll slowly evolve. Whether, like More said, whether it's banning certain builds, banning certain class splits, banning certain items. Say we open it up and say we can make iconics, and you can use Sharn gear, and then we realize, okay,
Ooh,
that this one piece of Sharn
sheesh.
gear is absolutely nuts, right? It can't be used. It's too build enabling. There's a subsequent one that could be used, a replacement, and then you start to create this environment that does support.
And the thing about things like that is you can eventually just find like counter comps or counter things, right? Like, for example, I was worried about like what a full tilt glass cannon sword could look like. They might just one shot everyone. But then what happens when someone brings in a fucking sword board paladin with 1200 HP at level 15 or whatever, and they just
200
they
MRR,
have so much
right?
MRR and you can't kill them and they just run up to you and they slowly like whittle you down because
Yeah,
you have no
and,
mana pots or whatever. And
and
like you build a full healer that's gonna outlast your mana or whatever. Then like it opens up counter comps.
it does, and especially when you're interacting in different environments, because you have Wayward Lobster PvP, right? We have the big pit, pretty much just dictate. We have these people going in, and these people are the ones to fight. We'll get a countdown on Discord, good get to countdown in some way. Once it hits one, everybody goes, and then you fight, and then the winner stays. You can uh, glug mana pots if you're a caster. You can glug HP, or you eat HP food if you're a melee, stuff like that, and then it it opens that up comparatively to doing a capture the flag or a death match where you don't have that immediate mana gain. You don't have that, and so that changed the builds and changes the meta
Hmm.
within those. And all of this really emphasizes DDo's building, which we've praised a few times, of it being super super in depth and unique. And you can have this level 15, so you have level 12 core enhancements, and then you have 3 levels to play with. So do you want to splash something here, or splash like how do you want to play it? It'd be really interesting to see all the different builds and things coming out.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And then like I think there's like lines on like the PvE side where you can maybe do like competitive stuff too.
Yeah, I completely agree. We just touched on PvP, and we talked about high end PvE rating, right? So you have a new raid or a new raid's coming out, right? There's going to be a fit wild hunt raid coming out over the summer, and say the community came together and put it together a pool and said we have $1,200, $100 each per person in the first guild to create or to complete Reaper 10 on the new raid.
Reaper 10 of this raid with a posted video
Yep.
with no safe spots, stuff like that, like no cheese or whatever.
Right. No exploiting, no interactions like that. And so it has to have to have video, you have to have a perspective from every single view, stuff like that, whatever it would be to enforce it. But the idea of creating a environment where currently the people that are at the top of the raids do so because they want to do so, because that's what they find fun about the game. And so we incentivize others to get into that, which not only creates competition um, within the community in a positive way, right? If you look at if you're trying to do a 100-meter dash and you have a certain time and you're just doing it on your own, and then all of a sudden someone comes in and does it faster than you, you're able to not only see what they did to get faster, but then also you have that drive to be able to want to one up that, to beat that. And
Hmm.
so competition innately breeds continued uh development
Competition.
of the scene, right? It's more so development, right? Competition does breed some
Yeah, yeah.
competition, but you don't know really what's possible if there's no competition. And so having that there really would push things. There may be secret builds that we have no clue about that, because of trying to
Bard
hyper
cleric.
focus. Bard cleric, there you go. Thrower dwarf cleric, right? We just don't know. And in a certain environment, suddenly these builds could become really, really, really good. And with DDo's build diversity, it's facilitated to do that. There's already that there. And so, on the PvP side, I feel like there could be some infrastructure that could be put in to really enable a more vibrant PvP community. The PvE side is already there, and the only thing that's really hampering that is sort of past lives and investment in that direction. But even with that, if you have a superior strategy and understanding and builds, then those past lives start to fall off pretty fast.
Like obviously the past lives and stuff make it easier for you, or whatever. But if someone comes in with just a completely better strategy and unit, they can still, maybe win if there's something on the line.
Again, insert back to the Arganesson group that like the Lava Diver group has almost everybody in that in the raid pushing teams on Lava Divers is uber completionist, has almost the best year in place, all that. And the Arganesson group didn't have that. You could clearly see direct like comparisons to say like the barbarian tanks that can reach 10,000 HP, and then Arganessons just had less than that. They couldn't reach 10,000. And so that's already those like either it's lives or it's build or it's gearing, stuff like that. But they were still able to beat to that R8, and then all the Riders came back and immediately within the next week came back and got to the R9. And so you already see that competition there. And so what would it look like? What are some sort of brackets or uh, goals, challenges that a PVE like tournament or competition could be in your eyes, Morgan?
Real quick before we
Yeah,
go off of that topic, I had something I wanted to bring up. A good example of that is even like if you don't play WoW or whatever, a lot of people know the big rivalry between Limit and now Echo, previously Method. And it's like you look at stuff like that, Method puts in ridiculous amounts of time and stuff like that, and to do certain things, and Limit puts in a lot of time or whatever. But Limit's mostly just been winning because they've just played better. Like they're not putting as much time or whatever, and they have less stuff than what like
those
Echo
resources.
would have had or whatever. But Limit was just playing better. Like so, if you just play better overall, generally speaking, you will win even if you're behind on like other aspects.
The
At
investment.
least like I don't know how well that would translate, but like in WoW, that's how it worked. But br- say again what you're talking about for brackets.
Yeah. So like Morgan said, putting in time, putting in energy, having understanding is really big. With where you can apply that is really important though. And so we talked about the high end, a new raid comes out, first person to Reaper 10, right? Let's say we had a first first lifer raid, right? We had a different bracket of
Yeah, that'd be cool.
first lifers. Who's the first person that can get Reaper 1 done? Right? That's all you have. You're a first life, you have nothing else. And you do Reaper 1. And then you get a reward, right? There's a cosmetic reward, there's a payout, something like that. So what would other sort of like brackets and tournament settings look like in that?
If they ever got rid of the store on hardcore, I think hardcore is the perfect environment for something like that. Like first raid group that if there's no store in hardcore, because obviously that's make it a little unfair or whatever. But if there's no store in hardcore and the first group to do, let's say R1, like
Thought
first group that you don't do, fuck that.
go hard, right?
Like yeah, sure. If we're going like crazy, first group to do R1 VOD, get something crazy. That'd be really cool, really fucking cool to see.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that'd be really nifty too. And then that's with complete reset, complete wipe. That is like the pinnacle of what a competition
Competitive.
is, right? So let's go with like what could happen on live servers. Well, one of the ideas that has come up is a like what we're really interested in is fastest race to
TR, yeah,
one
fastest.
to 20.
Yeah, that'd be a cool aspect. Be like, all right, we've got
Like they set it up or whatever, and they like stream or whatever, and they're like all of the main people that are going for it are streaming, and they're streaming, and they're going to watching like other people's streams and seeing like different strategies and something like that. It's like a big community event. They're like, oh, we see the duo of, you know, Newbie and Morgie already in Delaris 2, and let's go check in with this other team. It appears that they're in Delaris 1 or whatever, because like maybe the routes would be meta eyes. They're like, oh, this
Right,
team's the same level as them, but they've chosen to go to this area or something
right.
like that. You
They're
see different routes or whatever, or different team comps. Like let's it looks like Newbie and Morgie are playing double monk, so they're really behind right now. And then like it looks like we hit level 12 and we are fucking cruising.
flying, right? And so it would create that sort of back and forth with it, and having that like post commentator, having that commentator in the environment. And I don't think that these even have to be specifically to SSG, and SSG would have to sponsor them. Although it would be nice to see that support from the developers into a community-made thing. Seeing the community come together and do this, having someone be a dedicated host or a couple dedicated hosts that are commentating on have a baseline understanding and can share. Do it like any other analyst desk on any other competition where you have generally a host and then you have an analyst and they bounce off each other. You have someone who can do more play by plays, and then someone who can break down what just happened or what these macro thoughts are and keep the entire thing entertaining.
Oh my god, the sorcerer's thrown another delayed blast fireball and killed the whole group in front of them.
Yes, stuff like that. Now you can see you just pan over to level 14 Sork and suddenly see him just cruising through Giant Hold, throwing or Ravenloft 3 and just one-shotting entire packs on Reaper 1. And then it's a super big highlight on that. And then the breakdown of DBF is one of the highest damage spells in the game. At this point, you have a ton of support for it. Level 14, you also get Wild Flame. All of these things that sort of go into what you're actually seeing on screen.
It'd be cool to see stuff too, like you watch someone and it's all a really close race. You see someone die, and you're like,
Yeah.
oh, that crushes their time or whatever like that. If we don't allow cakes or something like that, that crushes their time or whatever, and it just really sets them back. And you're just like, oh man, that's really tragic or something like that. You see tragic twists like that or whatever. The team that's ahead by a quest or whatever dies or whatever, and then the other team behind them is suddenly caught back up, and it's cool.
Mhm. Yeah, and it would create. I really like that environment. At least we're more on the competitive side, but making that available to everyone, right? And seeing like we're very open and push that speed leveling 1 through 20, but we don't see a lot of other people doing that, right? We see some going through, okay, we're just going to go through leveling, so people that are just played the game for a long time, done a ton of TRs that know their route, but the moment that you put it in a centralized
Vacuum.
place, right, it suddenly can create all these different things.
Yeah, I think it's a really cool aspect. It's like it's worth noting that you and I both played other video games at a professional level or something like that. So it's like breeding competition is something that we're very comfortable with and stuff like that. It's like stuff that we love. Like
Would
it
would
makes games
you
more fun.
would you say that it has positively impacted your life in general playing competitively?
Absolutely. Like it kind of changes the way I think about a lot of things. Like except in some negative and positive ways. Because if I don't like really dedicate myself to something, I'm not gonna care about it as much. Like of course that's just like a normal person thing. But like games or whatever now, I still push myself hard or whatever, but if I'm not going for a goal, I just kind of like I'm like, well, yeah, whatever. But
It,
like if I'm pushing myself for a goal or whatever, like I play it seriously and I take it seriously.
it's shown you what you can do, and so approaching new goals and approaching new things that you're trying to accomplish is not as daunting or as spooky it could have been
Definitely.
when
Yeah,
you're
that's
just
the best way to
blindly
describe it.
going through things. And we both have different values, right? We both play at a competitive level, very high competitive levels, and I value the journey of getting to a place more than you do. You really value that like end completion, that goal, and then reaching that goal. Well, if I set a goal, I really value like what moves through that, and that's just a difference in values. But both were facilitated from that competitive environment,
Hmm.
and so providing that for
I value fucking winning.
yeah, providing that and fostering an environment where that is possible for others is something that we're both passionate about and definitely see doing.
Yeah, for sure. Like I love competitive aspects and things like that. And I get it's not for some people, right? Like some people they just want to hang out, they just want a game. But it's like for me, man, losing just unless I'm learning something very valuable from it,
Yeah.
it's not fun. Like playing in a competitive environment's a bit different. Losing's more okay because I understand these people are also doing the same thing and they're just as good, probably better than me. But like if I'm playing casually or whatever and I lose, I'm just like, man, I fucking hate it here.
You're going to be pushing yourself and you hold yourself to a very high standard.
Yeah, that's one of the more negative things. I'm very competitive now or whatever, and I just fucking hate losing. Even if I'm playing casually, I fucking hate it. Like even like the other night, you, me, and our other friend Emmerich just kind of drank a little and play Apex, and I was just like mad at myself because I wasn't playing well, even though I was like drinking or whatever. I was like, this is
Half,
not okay.
halfway through this night, this man goes, "I need to stop drinking so I can start playing better." Like what? I can't be a chimp like this.
I'm like, this is not okay. I don't like it. I'm not a fan.
Yep. And and versus me, where because I've played at such a high level, I value that high level a ton, but I don't value as much of like playing casually. I don't care what happens because I know I've played at a higher level and there are stakes involved. And so playing casually, I'm just trying to do whatever I want to do, having my own little goals, even playing competitively in more of a broad sense, say like a general ranked. We've been playing a lot of Apex Legends as of late, which has a ranked queue. And I don't really care where I'm placed, what I'm playing against, how I'm doing things. I'm playing it at my own speed. If I have a set goal, like one of our goals for this next season, um, that's going to be dropping in the next few days, is to reach a certain
Yeah.
level, to reach diamond, to maybe even push for masters, which is the top 0.01 per 0.04%, I think, for Apex is masters and the
Something
higher
like that.
ranked predator. If we're set for those, then I'm going to push myself a lot harder in that way. But right now, we're just sort of playing, just going through. I'm much more casual with it, and anything outside of like actual big tournaments, I'm not. I'm much more relaxed and chilled out.
It's interesting to see like how the correlation are because we both played professionally and stuff like that, and you came out of it and more of this aspect, and I came at it more competitive. And I'm just like, nah, man, I'm fucking better. I just want to win.
Yeah, he just wants to get it and get
Like
going.
even when we're playing casually, man, I'll fucking still like yell call outs and stuff like that. I'm just like fucking pat 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 pat. It's like I
Super into it.
get into it.
Yeah, and so seeing that in DDO is something that we both would enjoy seeing, and because I mean, DDO is 15 years old, and we have the experience of an older player in the first handful of years, um, and then those original players in the original state of the game, and now what we're currently playing at in the higher end of what the game is now, having those correlations and sort of seeing what the possibilities are. I could definitely see us putting together a tournament in the coming, say, months. Let's put it at, of what that would be, and then trying to promote that to the community and do crash tests of everything.
If you're interested, feel free to reply in the comments.
Yeah, exactly. See, we'd love to hear different ideas. We'd love to hear different perspectives, because we have our perspectives, and we're playing competitively. We want to see from a casual perspective what interests would be there, what would bring you from a casual environment to say, hey, I want to go into this competitive environment. I want to
Like, what
put
would it? Yeah, like what would it take? Like,
yeah, what brackets, like, oh, you don't want to push R10's new raids, right? But you do want to do, a level 5 PvP bracket, or you do want to do a level 1 through 20 speed leveling bracket, or like if I was to do 1 through 20, it could only be no store first lives, right? Which I think
Mhm.
I think that'd be a very interesting
It'd be
split
cool
to
because
do.
it also makes it like the normal builds may not be as good because the first life circ whatever you're gonna have a lot of mana issues and like you may just fucking die a lot in R1 compared to like it's probably better to just play a barb, smash blood tribute, and hold W.
Do you even do R1, right? You can play a barb, smash blood tribute, hold forward, and on R1, or do you do elite on a Sork and drop that R1 bonus, but have that clearing
Like
power?
gain wings and fireball.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot of different potential that's there, and we'd love to hear what more ideas are. We are who we are. It's just us two talking right now, hearing more from the community, which is the entire focus of this. Is there a general interest? Um, would there be is there a longevity within this environment? So
Yeah, that'd be great to see some more community interaction stuff like that and be able to push further on to these competitive aspects and things like that.